she's going to go over threshold concepts for her presentation. I've been informed that there's also some activities, so I hope that you're all prepared to do some activities. And then we'll wrap up with a little Q&A. So without further ado, Trudi.
Thank you, Kyle. Can everybody hear me okay? Is this working? It is. All right, good. No, it's not working. Whoa, or it's not working. I'm not talking into it enough. Whoops. Any better? Yes. Okay, all right. It was really exciting because I mentioned to Kyle that there was going to be activity and she said, yay! Which is not always the reaction I get. So I don't know if anybody wants to run out the door right now, but I think that is going to help us thinking about the threshold concepts. So, threshold concepts exploring the potential and the challenge for information literacy instruction, and seeing a lot of the feedback that we've been getting from the ACRL framework process. We know that people are both excited and a little bit nervous about what we're proposing. So, I just want to talk about that. So, the framework is very different from the standards. How many of you have had a chance to look at the draft framework, either the first part or the second part or both? Okay, so pretty much everybody. So what we're doing here is we really wanted to focus on the changing information landscape, which you've been hearing about today, and also helping students to understand the why, or what's going on behind it, the concepts, and not just the skills that are involved with it. I know a lot of us do one-shot sessions, or sometimes double-shot sessions, as I heard about in the previous session. But very often they're very directed, and the faculty member that you're working with may want something very specific. And it might be really what we're thinking of more as like research skills and not really information literacy. So what we were trying to think about here is sort of knowledge creation, searching, reporting, writing, sort of all of these processes that go into sort of the creation and dissemination of information, and not just the artifacts of these projects or processes. And thinking back to my own teaching, very often that is what I was talking about. It wasn't so much what was going into it. Yes, we talked about evaluation and primary and secondary sources, but the focus was different. So I wanted to explore some of that this afternoon. So we're looking for something that's really flexible, and that can be applied in your own setting, with your own needs, the faculty members, the programs that you're working with, rather than a one-size-fits-all. That has caused both excitement and worry. So why isn't this like the standards? Why aren't you telling me sort of what I need to do? Whereas we're thinking, this is really exciting. You can take some of these concepts and work with them in a way that really does work for you and your students. What I'm going to do with first-year students is going to be radically different than what I do with seniors. So we're hoping that that really works for people. And then there's this idea of metaliteracy that we've been talking about already today, but this different information environment. The last one was written in 1999 and accepted in 2000. It was just so different then. So we're really just sort of catching up in a way, and probably in 5 or 7 years or so, this framework, we hope it's based on sort of more, well, the concepts are more everlasting, but I can see it changing again. So let me ask you, I talked about a little bit about what I see for the potential. What do you see? So thinking right now about sort of the positives, or sort of how you think you can get this to work. We'll come to the challenges in a minute. And I know there are a couple of microphones. that, if we need them, are available. But if you want to just think for a minute, and then we'll see what you're thinking about in your own situation with this draft framework that uses threshold concepts and not a set of standards.
I'm very loud. So one thing that we've been doing at my institution is we run a faculty workshop that is based on information literacy that we set initially to the standards. This year we tried to reframe it around this idea of threshold concepts. And the thing that has been awesome about that is our particular faculty despise learning outcomes. They're forced to do them and they hate the concept of it because they feel like it's something immutable and measurable, and they hate them. So we try to talk to them about how would you set an information literacy standard or learning outcome for information literacy. They reject it. Threshold concepts, we totally get. And so we framed it, we stopped talking about SLOs, and just hated the word, didn't like it. So we were talking about how, okay, well, how does the student, what does the student need to do in terms of research to progress within the field? It was like they completely understood what we were talking about. So that's one way that we use it.
Great, thank you.
Can I just say off for sure? I was going to make a comment similar to that. Is that it counters the whole push toward assessment in a certain way. So I get frustrated as a faculty member with SLOs saying I'm not training monkeys. You know, we're not thinking check off the box kind of mentality of learning. Student learning outcomes measures a certain kind of learning, but it's not what all learning is. And threshold competence allows us to go beyond the tasks that students can perform at the end of the semester to how learning actually happens.
Thank you. Yes.
I think that the fact that it focuses on, helping students understand the why is important. And just one example that comes to my mind is, in the past I've had to teach citations in particular. And that seems to be something that students don't like doing, but also don't really get why. And it seems like the threshold concepts, some of them directly seem to go at underlying concepts as why you do stuff. And it might make it easier to teach that.
So giving them sort of the background behind it then helps them to understand why they're learning it. Yes, please.
I just want to piggyback on that because in the spring, I was able to kind of use this idea of threshold concepts in a class that I was only teaching for 15-20 minutes. The professor wanted a librarian to come in to talk to biology students about they need to understand primary research in biology, where to find an article, but we talked about scholarship and building on scholarship and, okay, that one person's research is building on another person's research, and you need to go back and see where that individual, and in 15 minutes, I got a great concept across to them, plus I showed them, where to find, how to find that primary, which database to use, and how to find it.
So again, it sounds like the understanding behind it really enabled you to teach what it was that probably was what
Right,
you were
I didn't
asked
just
to.
go in and show them the database. We talked first, and then just showed them.
So there's some great examples, but what about the challenges? Anna.
Well, just to also respond to my colleague who's a faculty member at my institution, one of the challenges is figuring out how to assess something related to them. And whether or not a threshold concept can be assessed is, I think, something to be discussed. I don't think it's a given that the concept can be assessed because it's not an outcome. But how do you create outcomes that are tied to threshold concepts, particularly when you're talking about the dispositional and the kind of learning that isn't going to happen even by the end of the course, let alone the end of the session. And librarians are largely dealing with SLOs whose scope is 50 minutes. So how do you make that connection between how to figure out if this actually was learned?
Okay. So there's parts of it that are going to be much more difficult to assess. Yes.
I think that one of the challenges for me is that it's a process, but its nature of threshold concept is something that you struggle with for a long time. And eventually, after working with the sort of underlying concepts, you grasp. But in my experience, it seems like that takes a couple of years, which I may not have contact with the student. You know, I may get them once or twice, I may get a double shot, I may have them in the credit course, but I don't necessarily have ongoing contact with any of the students.
So to do justice to threshold concept in full or all of the threshold concepts, you really need more time.
Well, and I think it also needs to be integrated into other things, which is both of which are very different.
Yes, so doing it sort of on your own also is not going to work either without that integration. Please.
Oh, I was thinking about as far as the strategy for implementation. That's going to be a little difficult because I think faculty are used to what we do. You know, it may come in different ways that we present it, but they're used to this concept. Whereas, you know, we still saying that, you know, they may not like those old concepts. Some, you know, institutions, they're used to those things and they know what Michaelsen present and do. So when you kind of come in with, okay, these new terms that faculty do not understand, they may not really like that because they want to know what you're doing beforehand. So it's going to be, it will have to be very strategic in how you implement these changes. And it's not like you're going to walk on campus and the administration, like, okay, you'll change the whole framework of what you do, you know, go for it. We have to really make sure that they understand and faculty understand to really have success. So, I mean, it's going to take some time because I think we have to really grasp the concepts ourselves first and know exactly what it is we have created and know exactly how it's going to be implemented in our individual institutions and environments. So, more.
Yeah. Yes.
I think threshold concepts, it's really, to me, like, really tied just to good, effective teaching. And it's very hard to be an effective teacher when you only have like a one-shot session. So in a way, I see it both as a benefit and a challenge because you're putting it out there that, hey, real learning needs to happen because that's really all that transformative and all those descriptive things that mean threshold concept to me equals good, effective teaching skills. And so I see that as a benefit, that that's what we're promoting in these concepts. But I also see it as a challenge because of the time that a one-shot. Like when I teach a one-shot, I end up trimming it down to just 2 or 3 objectives. Some of that end up being very skills-based because of time and need and you know, teaching with the research, you know, what the professor expects and really needs at the level that I'm at the community college level. It tends to be very skills-based, and at that level, students do need those skills. So then to teach the why, I throw it in there. Like an example would be like when I tell students if you're at home and you have to log on to the databases and you get that gateway, that's because information isn't free, folks. You're only having access to this because you're a student. No one else has access to these databases. And so I'll throw it in there, but whether students, I mean, you just, maybe a dim little light, not like a bright light.
A nice light.
Might get that, the battery, the connection there for a second, or a brighter student might just go, whoa, you just blew my mind, but, not all of them can get close to that.
At my institution, the librarians are not faculty, and so we're not looked at the same level. So teaching skills, how to search error, that's all fine, but with these concepts, it's expanding more into the realm of teaching, which is their purview, faculty's purview. So I think that's going to be another challenge to us on faculty, on teachers, or possibly being viewed as stepping on their toes.
Okay. Yes, and that reminds me of something that Don and Teresa said in their session in this room right before lunch, is that maybe, and I'll be talking more about this later, but if there's a way to sort of have conversations and sort of influence what they then decide that they're doing, if you yourselves can't do it in the same way as if you had faculty status. So let me take one more. Yeah.
I'm thinking that there's going to be difficulty with librarian funding, because some of my librarians are buying into this, and some of them are like, yeah, I'm just going to keep doing everything the way I always did. Nothing's going to change.
All right. One more.
I would like to say that perhaps they didn't buy into information literacy. You make the shift from bibliographic instruction.
Thank you for saying that. So I'll be talking about some of these things, but if I don't address them and you still have lingering questions, please let me know when there's time for questions at the end. So what I'd like you to do before I actually go much further with this is you might want to work at your table or portions of your table work together, but if you could take about 10 minutes and come up with a class activity or an assignment that addresses scholarship is a conversation. And I just put the short blurb for scholarship is a conversation there. And I know that you may be sitting with people who teach students at a totally, you might teach graduate students and they teach first-year students, but if you could think about this, and at the end of the 10 minutes, what I'll do is see if there's some volunteers. Actually, Craig Gibson, in a presentation at WeLu in Canada, we did something similar to this, and it was really fascinating to hear some of the things that people were coming up with. And so then people are thinking, oh, I could adapt that, I could steal that. This might sort of get some ideas going in case the draft is actually approved. Yes, do you have any questions before you sort of go to it? Okay, all right. So let me know if you do while you're working, but I'll reconvene us in about 10 minutes. And would it help if I read that scholarship is a conversation? No? Okay. All right.
Here.
report on what it was you developed, what you thought might work. It was just fabulous to see all the energy and animation that was going on. So I cut it short by a minute or two, thinking there might be more on the reporting end, and wanted to save time for that.
We had a couple of ideas. One was to just have students find a journal article, and they could find it about anything that would be of interest to them in the topic they may want to study. But look at the number of authors that are with the journal article, which these days it seems that, at least in the sciences, it's rare that you have a single author. You could have 2 or 3, you could have up to 20 because teams work, there's large teams working. They could be through the country, they could be international, but you have, on a lot of articles, you might have 10 or 15 people from different institutions working together. So you have this conversation going on about whatever the content is that's international and a lot of people involved. And then the second idea was that you can look at the references, or you can do a citation tracking of those and see where these authors, where else they've published, how many other times they've worked together, or they've worked with other people. So you can see it can grow into a large community rather quickly.
Yeah, and that's sort of exciting because rather than just thinking about how you have to cite it, you put et al, or do you put out all those names or whatever. It's sort of what's going on with all those names. So that's really great.
Kind of similar to what you talked about in the second idea, where you trace an idea. Two of us are community college librarians, and the other two deal with regular career or business sort of design, very low level assignment. But take a popular topic like the Clippers or some sports controversy, find an article in a popular, like Huffington Post, popular magazine, and then try to find responses to that article, try to follow links from that article to other things that are responding to it that generated information for it. See if you can find the initial post that started this controversy. Try to figure out what's happened around that one article, or have students try to find it. You present them first.
And so, teaching them searching and all would sort of fit right into that.
Less searching actually than trying to find things that are directly linked to each other. It's sort of the way citations work in an academic paper.
Okay.
Our idea was mostly to take it out of an academic context.
Okay.
One of the things that I find is that students don't particularly care that this science researcher has written 8 other articles about genetic evolution. They do care a lot about dogs. So it's just a little bit more appealing to them. They're going out and finding a little bit more about something they like, and it's applicable to things that they will do in their regular lives, where our students may not go on to grad school where they are tracing somebody's authorship.
So it places it such that it would speak to your students.
Yeah.
But it helps them see the connection to something more scholarly if they can trace it through maybe something popular or through a blog where they might, depending on the topic, they might actually link to something a little more scholarly or a little higher level where they can see the source.
Thank you.
Our idea is that you actually have students engage in a scholarly conversation. So this may not be something you would do in the library, but you could give to faculty as an idea. If they're doing anything with like a discussion board or a wiki, if it's sharing information, you could give them the same type of prompt that you made for discussion. It could be an article, it could be a website, it could be an idea, and it almost doesn't matter what the prompt is. And as long as you tell the students, you can be explicit about setting this discussion up as a scholarly conversation. You could set up rules saying no ditto posts, no posts that say I agree or disagree, but instead, you take a comment in the post and you must add on to it in some way. And then the discussion, whether it takes place over the course of a week or a semester or however long, is an actual act of scholarly conversation.
So rather than just being the consumers, the producers there.
Any other ideas? Yes.
We were talking about an idea of how the citations, in particular in-text citations, can be seen as documenting this conversation, and sort of, we worked at that maybe the different points of view that would be cited in a paper could become the script of a play. Joan says this, Smith says this, I say this, and then just sort of expand it, and maybe you could even possibly have the students act it out. I don't know if it actually works in practice, but I think it's a great idea.
My students love it.
Yeah.
They totally would.
Teresa, could you just talk a little bit about?
Yeah, do you have it with you?
I do.
Okay. I brought a textbook today specifically to Trudi. I'm Teresa Tano. I'm a assistant professor in the Department of English and Writing. So you have the first year writing program. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
They say, I say, the rules that matter in academic writing. The book is about 10 years old, and when it came out in composition, half the field freaked out, and it actually, it was going to be the end of writing as we knew it, kind of thing. The other half of the field loved it. It's still a controversial text, but this is basically how a lot of people in my field teach at least 4 of the threshold concepts that have been in the draft. And scholarship as a conversation is the basis of this text. It's they say, I say, the rules that matter in academic writing. And part of what some people in the field found problematic is that there are physical templates in this book. It's kind of like fill-in-the-blank activities for students to do. Can I pass it around? Sure. And some people said that was reducing writing to something that's formulaic and bringing us back to kind of a sentence level thinking about it. I've used it for 10 years. It blows students' minds, really, once they start to get the hang of the instructions. So I think it could be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having your hand up.
We came up with like having students search a keyword search in Google Scholar, and then I just say keyword search just because maybe it would be more interesting to them to search something they're interested in, and then look at like the articles that come up and kind of look at, cited by, and look at like maybe the top 2 or 3 or a couple of the articles, and then analyze how they're related to each other in a paragraph or paragraph response, how will the articles under that article, how do they relate to each other, maybe even not even necessarily having to read all the articles at a lower level if they're scholars, especially if they're scholarly articles.
So let me just take one more. So your hand.
We had a wonderful idea back here. Thank you. She opens 3 tabs, has the students open 3 tabs on the internet and compare their searches from Google, a database, and Twitter to include the social media discussion going on, as well as the database and the internet. Sorry, I don't know if that's what exactly.
All right. And I don't want to not take yours. So
we had, actually Kathy came up with this idea and we all built on it. And it was basically, we kind of chose a sophomore level and we decided to choose a film class. And we said that it would be a 50-minute class. And we thought that before the students came to the class, they would have all had to watch a movie, a film that would be, part of the curriculum. And that they would come in and then as groups of 4 students perhaps have their own discussion about the film and have a recorder, keeping track of relevant comments, interesting viewpoints, and so forth, and note down, Mary said this, Melissa said that kind of thing, and then have the teacher ask essential questions that would lead them to see that they just had a scholarly conversation, and then perhaps show some kind of film reviewers circle kind of thing and have them compare what they did to that, and possibly even bring in that format as process thing and then raise it up a level and say, okay, so now what happens when it gets a little bit more sophisticated? We could have a blog, an article, a news review. So we thought that might be one way to kind of do it in a subject matter.
thank you very much, Mary. Yeah. So lots of ideas, and you can see just the range of them and what would work with different groups of students, and the chance to bring some real creativity into it, which I think is important. So just as I was thinking sort of about the implications of the framework. So in increased collaborations between librarians and course instructors and perhaps others on campus as well. But you know, this is something we've always wanted, you know, with the standards, you know, it's so important. But we really hope in finding that for many faculty members, these threshold concepts just make sense. And so we're hoping that this really will increase these collaborations. And this was something that came up earlier, that these one-shots, you know, might be good at accomplishing particular things, but it may not be information literacy per se. And so we're sort of going out a little bit on a limb saying this, and there's, you know, still a place for those, but we really need to be building it more into the curriculum and integrating it and sort of letting go of it somewhat, but you know, hoping somebody is then going to take it and do that integration. And more formative assessment, and again, we're not coming up with the assessment for this because we are saying that it needs to be done at each institution. And so for us to come up with the assessment for it really wouldn't make sense. So again, you know, we are getting pushback on this, but we think that this formative assessment, and this may go to what was being said earlier about the learning objectives and such, that this will really help in increasing student learning. Hoping for some sort of coordinated curriculum. So it might be, and we've decided on an order for the frames with the threshold concepts, but it's more based on what seems to resonate with people. It's not saying this is the one you start with and the sixth one is the one you get to when they're seniors or whatever. We're not doing that. But it's possible that in working with faculty members, there will be a decision that this course might really fit well with this, and this threshold concept might fit well, but we already had an example where there were a couple of threshold concepts combined. Okay, we really already talked about this, but you know, even what you were saying about what you might do, it really does vary. We had a lot of feedback from librarians at community colleges. We do have a member of the task force who is a member of, is at a community college, Troy Swanson. He also worked with a number of other community college librarians with what we were developing to get their feedback on it. So we really have been trying to keep the pulse on that. Using students as partners in action research, be a possibility. I'm going to talk about some things I've been doing with my core students this summer. They are guinea pigs. I think they know they're guinea pigs, but they're pretty good about it. And other implications, you talked about some of this with the challenges. Didn't know if there might be anything else you wanted to add at this point.
Explain what you mean by action research.
Yes, and so what I'm thinking about here is actually sort of trying out some of these things on the students and seeing how it works, seeing how they react to it. And in some cases, what I'm doing is I'm just sort of laying this out to them. This is what we're working on. This is what we're trying. We want to see how you react to it, and working through that way.
This kind of goes back to the challenges, Trudi, but I think a lot of people that I've spoken to, perhaps regionally, are concerned that they may have used the standards and finally gotten them embedded into their gen ed, and I'm in that exact, 10 years later, I've finally gotten a whole scalable info-lit program through my whole 4-year gen ed program, and everyone's going to me, now what? You know, and I wonder how many other people are in a similar situation, and what does the committee or task force feel about that, or are they?
Well, a recommendation, and our recommendations to the board are going to be part of that draft that you're going to be seeing next week. We're saying sort of 1 year for sunsetting the standards. So that there would be this period where they both would be in effect to give people a chance to start making some changes. But also sort of thinking about some of the ideas, and I'm going to mention some specifically. I think it would be possible to sort of group some of them and put them under the threshold concepts.
I mean, what I like about them is the why. Why are you doing this? And I mean, I have the benefit of teaching a 3-credit course, so I've been doing a lot of the why all along because I have that time, and not everybody does. So, I mean, we've always talked about skills and concepts. You hear that a lot, but you know, if we take concepts and skills and start every activity with a why, even if it's a small activity, hopefully we can find a way to build it, you know, so I can see that, but I just know a lot of people are very nervous about that.
I think that they're not incompatible, and that they're, in fact, what's the word, that they feed on each other, because I think the old standards are more things that people need to know how to do. And those are, the learning outcomes are often, you know, in those kind of active verb type forms, whereas the framework is more things to know, to understand. I don't think they substitute for the standards, but I think they complement them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there may be some things from within the standards that you just sort of decide to jettison, but I think that some of it really does fit. And I'll actually.
Well, one other implication, and perhaps it's a flip on the concern, and it's a valid one, the idea of language finally being embedded that cites the 2000 documents. So then what do you do? Technically though, and I don't know a ton about this, I know programs have to go for review. So the opportunity then is, okay, we're going to have a new framework that's going to inform our understanding of what it is we teach. When the next review period occurs for the programmatic expression of what information literacy is, that's an opportunity to allow the framework to, or the threshold concepts within the framework to nuance the language of the outcomes that you've worked with already. So it's almost like they don't have to be mutually exclusive. It's always going to be a cycle of updating what we do and how we teach it.
So let me just, I do not, like Mary, have a 3-credit course, but I do have a 1-credit information literacy course. And so what I'm finding is that I'm sort of taking some of the things that I was doing before, but having these overarching concepts, which has really changed the way I've been teaching them. And so, for example, with the scholarship is a conversation, you know, it allows me to do some database searching in there, talking about references and citations, and then issues of format mode and where are these conversations happening and that type of thing. So I'm finding that even though I'm doing some of the same things, I'm sort of thinking about it differently. I'm definitely framing it really quite differently for my students. So this, which I can actually get up, I think, a little bit larger, even though is something that one of my teams did, I think it was earlier last week. And it's very hard to read, I understand, but I asked them to, they're mostly seniors, they're taking this course, probably they thought they would have been graduating in May and weren't because they missed this requirement. And so I have them this summer, but you know, so I don't have to start in the first year. And so what they did, this is Padlet. I don't know how many of you know about Padlet. Padlet.com. Students seem to love it. And they can just interactively put things up on this wall, and it sort of retains everything that they're putting up. So I have groups work on it all the time. So what they did, I gave them the scholarship as a conversation, the description of it, and then the knowledge practices / abilities from the draft. I said, design a class for first-year students using their topic. And they came up with this. And so in here, there's they had used the learning objectives. They came up with an example, change in scholarly perspective. They had an in-class exercise for the students. They had extra credit. The conversation is ongoing. It was really pretty cool, you know, and I hadn't done a ton of teaching about the scholarship as a conversation. They are seniors, but they were able to put this whole thing together, and then there's two teams, and so the other team had one that wasn't quite as sophisticated as this, and then they got very competitive, and they, how do you get that background, and, you know, so anyway, it seemed to work pretty well, so that's sort of this research that I'm doing with the students, you know, here's this threshold concept, what do you make of it, instead of sort of trying to do it more surreptitiously. So we'll just quickly finish up. And then searching as exploration, which was the searching as strategic, talking about research as an iterative process, which these students actually totally got. Talked about the value of serendipity, and after the one student in the class who actually knew what the word serendipity meant, explained it to everybody. We talked about that, and then a little bit about database searching, but much more than that. And I have sort of a worksheet that I gave them, and they had previously done another worksheet where they listed parties who might be interested in a particular conversation. So scholarship is a conversation. Sent them off to this place I had just discovered called Exploratory.org.uk, where they were developing a thinking guide for it. This was a little challenging to them, but some of them successfully did it. And then they looked back at the description for searching as exploration. They thought about what might happen when they were searching that would send them off in a new path, the exploration part. And then I had them skim an article, which I've cited down here, Chance in the Midst of Design, Approaches to Library Research Serendipity, and look through it and figure out what they could do to increase the likelihood of serendipity happening, which might sound like a contradiction. But it seemed to really engage them. So I'm just taking these threshold concepts, and again, it's the luxury of seniors, but it's been really, I think it's been working really pretty well. So, you know, I'm still able to get in some of the other things, but it really has dramatically changed what I'm doing in the class. I'm finding really enhanced conversations with faculty members when I tell them about the threshold concepts. They say, tell me more. Do you have an article about it? You know, which is pretty neat because I didn't get that kind of reception with the standards. So I really like it. I had actually a writing and critical inquiry professor stop by the reference desk the other day, and she said, you know, I really want to do something. I've been working with her with the badges to some extent, but I really want to do something, you know, because research is inquiry. It's so important to me. I said, do I have a threshold concept for you? And then I sent her the list of the 6 with the descriptions, and she wrote back within 20 minutes. I want to do this one, and this one in my course this fall. So it's setting up some conversations that are really good. I'm hoping that it will influence that upper level information literacy requirement that I mentioned in the keynote, because these threshold concepts do make sense to the faculty members, that they might see connections. And then one of the things that I really, really would like to do is to try to go in with our badges and try to somehow capture some of this. One of the things that didn't come through this morning, I don't think with the badging, because of a question I got after that session, was, are these badges sort of eliminating the metaliteracy part because it's more you just answer these questions? And no, they're real discovery explorations. There's a lot of thinking about their thinking. So I'm wondering if it's possible to do this, and this is something I would really, really like to try. So just things that are happening sort of on my campus with it. So let me turn it over to you. Any questions that you have, discussion?
Question I have is, how do you see the changes in the library and librarians to just kind of further discussion of our campuses about student success. Because the term that we just have to be very aware of, and that's what everyone wants, and everyone's interested in. You know, for me to say I'm going to tell you exactly that students will learn this, this, and that, it may not really translate to some people on campuses as stuff that they, you know, how does this relate to this student being successful? So do you see these changes as really being helpful to that discussion? I think everyone has to have in the back of their mind as we determine how to make these changes on our overall campuses.
I definitely think so, because I think that their understanding is sort of more universal and not the very particulars, and so it's more translatable, I think, as our information environment changes. But one of the documents that Ellie Fogarty, who is at Middle States Commission on Higher Education, and Joan Lippincott of CNI wrote, is sort of this introduction to the threshold concepts, or the framework for faculty members and administrators. And so I have to go back and reread it, but some of the language in there too might be really helpful for that particular purpose.
So what were the names again?
There are two of our task force members, it was Joan Lippincott and Ellie Fogarty, but that will be a part of the draft that will be up on the web next week.
Thank you.
I noticed in your keynote speech that you were going to be putting the exercises in a different part of the framework. What about the assessment pieces? Are those going to be in a different part as well? I know that you had changed some of the assessment within the framework.
It was actually called assessment/assignments originally. We took out the word assessments entirely, left it as assignments, and then moved it out. So you're going to see them in this draft. This draft is composed of what we're considering the framework and then the appendices. It's a little messy, but it's all together. And those then will go on that sort of online, in the online sandbox. People were really concerned it would date it, and then one of the things we thought about is this has to go through several review processes. There's 2 ACRL committees that have to review it, and then there's the board. And so we thought if they got hung up on these assignments, it could really sort of mess everything up, and that wasn't the idea. We really want those frames to be what they're concentrating on. So we would like to see them where they were because they made sense where they were, but we thought these were sort of powerful reasons for moving them.
May I jump in? To me, what I just heard in Trudi's words, though, is an opportunity that once the framework has been finalized and adopted, it's text. We can all take it to our campuses and create the version on your campus, and then you can dump back in everything that's going to be useful for your librarians to have after each frame. And so that's exciting that now we get to do that for ourselves. For me, at least, I think it's exciting. So.
Yeah, and our intention was never that these are the ones to use. This was just for the people who said, I have no idea what to do. We were just saying, here's some examples. And I think that, you know, Donna's words were saying was that it might have seemed as if we were saying, this is what you have to do, and that was not the intent at all.
My question is on the threshold concepts. You're developing the ones for librarians, for information science. Those of us who are liaison librarians and working with a discipline, they have a set of threshold concepts as well, or maybe they're finalized, maybe they're not, maybe they're, but they. How do you see those two interacting? The discipline and ours together, are we more the library part, and the information science part, more the other part?
That's a really interesting question. Yeah. Has anybody here, but let me just ask, who is a liaison, have you thought about that before Okay.
I have, that's what's whizzing through my mind right now, because I'm thinking, I'm at a community college, I liaise to the automotive program, I liaise to the biology department, I liaise to the nursing department, I liaise to the computer technologies, computer science department, and I'm thinking, I'm screwed.
I was thinking before when Donna was saying about the, creating documents for your own campus and to kind of possibly help you out in terms of you're being screwed on campus, you know, with all this diversity. If you chose, you know, all of this doesn't have to be done all at once. If you chose one threshold concept to work with for like a year across campus, you could farm it out to the faculty themselves. And I know that faculty are busy. I know that they will tell you how busy they are. But just say, this is something that my discipline is doing right now. Do you see anything that you're doing already that might kind of speak to this? And have them send you their assignments, or have them send you, you know, clips from their syllabus. If I get an email like that, it might take me 3 minutes to think about, you know, my own course and then just copy and paste stuff. So maybe that's the way to do it, is try to do it, have faculty do some of the work for you, and then do it like kind of one at a time.
And that could create a community conversation too, if everybody's sort of thinking about the same threshold concept. If you have a teaching center on campus, that might be something where you can have some programming. And then the other thing that, you know, we know that the visual literacy standards are the ones for nursing, or the ones for, you know, because they've been developed in many cases, that those groups might then be going back and looking at them, and they may be making the connections between the ones that we've come out with through this Delphi study that Lori and her group have worked with, and the ones for the discipline. So, and I know that Science and Technology section and the Women and Gender Studies sections are both poised to start on this work right away. So I have time for one more question or no more questions?
It's a quick one.
Anybody have a quick question?
Have there been any discussions on the planning committee about other information literacy standards that are out there, such as the value rubrics, AAs, and CU value rubrics, and how this will affect those?
There's been a little bit of conversation about it. But again, something I referred to earlier in our meeting in Chicago was that we were sort of developing this for librarians, sort of as what's important to teach. So we didn't start with sort of the working with other groups quite as quickly as we originally planned to do, because we felt that while we're happy to have them look at this, we don't think that what they're going to say is going to actually affect what we're saying. It's more the librarian feedback that's affecting it. But we do plan to have an implementation group, and ACRL is hiring a half-time person who's going to be doing a lot of this outreach and this implementation group. There will be lots of continuing education opportunities, lots of work with other groups. So I think that it's not something that the group that I'm co-chairing is going to be doing, but I think it is going to be happening. Thank you all very much.